The afternoon sun hung low over the Pacific Ocean, casting long shadows across the sprawling deck of the Malibu beach house that had become the epicenter of so much drama over the past months. The property, once a sanctuary where love was supposed to blossom, had transformed into something far more complicated, a place where hidden truths lurked beneath layers of deception and carefully constructed personas. This particular Saturday afternoon would prove to be the day when everything changed. R.J. Forrester had driven out to the beach house with determination burning in his chest, though he couldn't quite articulate why the urgency felt so pressing. His stated mission was simple enough: find his brother Will and discuss some family matters that had been weighing on him since the mysterious appearance of Dylan, the art teacher who seemed to have seamlessly integrated herself into Will's life at the beach house. But beneath that surface reason lay something deeper, an intuition that RJ had been trying to ignore for weeks. Something about Dylan didn't quite add up. As his car pulled up the circular driveway, RJ noticed the quiet of the house. No one appeared to be inside, but the sound of gentle laughter drifted from the direction of the ocean-facing patio. RJ followed the sound, his footsteps echoing softly on the stone pathway that led around the side of the mansion. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Dylan sat cross-legged on one of the oversized lounge chairs that overlooked the Pacific, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder as she bent forward with concentration. Beside her sat Hayes Finnegan, the young boy who had become so attached to the art teacher that he talked about her almost constantly. The child's small fingers held a pencil with determined focus, his tongue peeking out slightly as he concentrated on the paper before him. "That's perfect," Dylan was saying, her voice warm and encouraging in a way that seemed effortless. "See how you're making the lines flow together? That's what makes something beautiful when all the pieces work in harmony." For a moment, RJ simply watched. There was something almost tender about the scene, something that made him question the suspicions that had brought him here in the first place. Dylan appeared to be exactly what she claimed to be, a dedicated art teacher who genuinely cared about her students. Her patience with Hayes was evident in every gesture, every word of praise and encouragement. Then, the wind changed. The Pacific breeze had been mild all afternoon, but suddenly it gathered strength, as if gathering momentum from across the ocean itself. It swept across the patio with unexpected force, and in its wake papers began to fly. Dylan's sketches scattered everywhere. The loose pages that had been tucked beside her on the chair took flight like startled birds, some tumbling across the stone floor, others dancing on the wind toward the edge of the patio. Dylan reached out instinctively, her hands grasping at empty air as her careful work escaped her control. "Oh no!" she cried out, her voice carrying both frustration and something that sounded almost like panic. "Hayes, honey, don't worry, I can gather these." But RJ was already moving. The memory of all those times he'd retrieved things for Luna, all those moments when he'd shown her he could be relied upon, propelled him forward. He crossed the patio in quick strides, bending down to collect the scattered pages before they could blow away completely. "I've got them," he called out, already gathering the papers into his hands. It was as he straightened up, papers in hand, that the world shifted. RJ's eyes fell on the sketches he held, and his breath caught in his throat. These weren't simple children's drawings. These weren't the doodles of someone teaching basic art principles. These were fashion designs, intricate, sophisticated, executed with a level of technical skill that could only come from someone trained in design and possessed of genuine artistic vision. The kind of sketches you'd find in a designer's portfolio, not in the recreational folder of an art teacher. But it was more than that. It was the style of the sketches that made RJ's hands begin to tremble. Every line carried a signature quality that RJ would have recognized in a darkened room. The way the fabric was rendered, showing the movement and drape with an almost three-dimensional quality despite being drawn on a two-dimensional surface. The innovative details, unexpected angles, creative fabric combinations, design elements that shouldn't work together but somehow did. The shading technique precise and deliberate, creating shadows that gave the sketches depth and dimension. It was Luna's technique. Not just similar to Luna's technique, it was Luna's technique. And then RJ saw it in the corner of each sketch, so small that it would be easy to miss if you weren't looking, for it was a tiny crescent moon. A symbol. A signature. Luna's signature? RJ's hands began to shake more noticeably. His eyes moved rapidly from one sketch to the next, confirming what his initial impression had revealed. The handwriting on some of the sketches' notes about fabric weights, color combinations, structural details. The handwriting was different from the sketches themselves, but the artistic vision was unmistakable. This was Luna's work. This had to be Luna's work. Those are just... Dylan's voice came from behind him, and RJ turned to see her standing now, her body language completely transformed from the warm, patient teacher of moments before. Her eyes were wide, almost frightened. "They're nothing important. I was just helping Hayes practice. Sometimes I draw patterns for him to color in." But her explanation didn't match what RJ held in his hands. It didn't match the level of sophistication displayed in these designs, the years of training evident in every line, the distinctive personal style that had been refined through countless hours of dedicated practice. "These are nothing," RJ heard himself say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant as if someone else was speaking through him. He looked directly at Dylan, his eyes searching her face. "You expect me to believe that these are nothing?" He held the sketches up between them, using them as a physical barrier between his body and hers, as if the paper might protect him from some terrible truth he wasn't ready to face. This technique he continued, his voice growing quieter but somehow more intense. "The way you shade, the proportions, the flow of the designs. I've seen this before. I've studied work that looks exactly like this." He paused, swallowing hard. "And this symbol here, this tiny moon that you've hidden in the corner of each sketch, Luna? This is what Luna used to do. This is her signature." Dylan's face went pale. Her hands clenched at her sides, and RJ could see the trembling that started in her shoulders and seemed to travel down through her entire body. "I'm Dylan," she said, but the words sounded hollow now, empty of the conviction they should have carried. You're not thinking clearly." "No," RJ said, and he stepped closer to her, his athletic frame making the movement feel almost threatening despite his lack of intention to intimidate. "No, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in weeks. Maybe months." He reached out and gently but firmly grasped her wrist. Not to hurt her, his touch was controlled, careful, but to ground her, to demand her full attention, to make her understand that he would no longer accept lies. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low and intense. "Look directly at me and tell me the truth." Dylan's eyes darted away from his gaze, moving toward the ocean, toward Hayes, who had stopped drawing and was watching the adults with confusion and growing concern. "These designs," RJ said, holding up the sketches with his free hand. "The style, the technique, the way you use light and shadow, this is unmistakable. This is Luna Nozawa's work. You're Luna. You've been Luna all along." "No," Dylan protested, trying to pull her wrist away from his grip. "I'm not. You're being crazy. I'm just Dylan. I'm a teacher. I came to Los Angeles to what?" RJ interrupted, his pain and confusion evident in his voice now. "To hide, to run from something, to infiltrate Will's life under a false identity." He shook his head, struggling to process the implications of what he was discovering. "Why? Why would you do this? Why would you come back?" The trembling in Dylan's body intensified. Her eyes filled with tears, but whether from fear, guilt, or some complex mixture of emotions, RJ couldn't determine. What he could see was that his accusations had struck true. Her silence, her refusal to meet his eyes, her body language, all of it screamed confession louder than any words could have. "You don't understand," Dylan whispered, finally her voice barely audible above the sound of the waves crashing against the shore below. "You don't know what happened. You don't know what I had to do." RJ felt something tighten in his chest. Those words, they sounded so familiar. Luna had said things like that before, always with some justification, some explanation for why her actions, no matter how harmful, had been necessary. "Then tell me," RJ said, his voice cracking slightly despite his attempt to maintain control. "Tell me the truth. Who are you really? Are you Luna? Did you fake your death? Is that what happened?" "I'm Dylan," she insisted again, but the words carried even less weight this time. I was just... She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she yanked her wrist away from his grasp with surprising strength, stumbling backward and wrapping her arms around herself protectively. Her shoulders curled inward, making herself smaller, as if trying to disappear into her own body. Hayes, sensing the tension and distress, began to back away slowly. "Ms. Dylan," he called out tentatively. "Are you okay?" "Hey, sweetheart, go inside," Dylan said, her voice wavering. "Go find Ivy, or your uncle will." "Tell them." She paused, seeming unsure what to tell the confused child. "Just go inside. Okay, go inside now." The boy obeyed, sensing that something was very wrong, though he didn't understand what. As his small form disappeared into the house through the sliding glass doors, RJ and Dylan stood facing each other with nothing but the sketches and the widening chasm of truth between them. RJ looked down at the designs in his hands again, unable to stop himself from tracing the distinctive features that marked them so unmistakably as Luna's work. The flowing lines of a jacket that seemed to move with the wearer, a dress design that incorporated an unexpected asymmetrical hemline, something Luna had always favored. Sketches for what appeared to be a complete collection, each piece related to the others by subtle design themes and a cohesive aesthetic vision. "How long?" RJ asked, finally, his voice hollow. "How long have you been lying to everyone? How long have you been living as Dylan while being Luna?" Dylan didn't answer. She simply stood there, her body still trembling, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Her silence, an admission more complete than any confession could have been. The designs, RJ continued, unable to stop himself from asking the questions that were flooding through his mind. Are you still designing? Have you been working at Forrester? Is that why Steffi was considering hiring you?" Still silence. "Does Will know?" RJ asked, his voice rising slightly. "Does anyone know who you really are?" Dylan finally looked up at him, and in her eyes, RJ saw something that chilled him to his core. He saw the same desperate intelligence he'd seen in Luna's gaze countless times before. He saw a survivor, someone willing to do whatever was necessary to achieve her goals. He saw someone capable of manipulation, of deception, of spinning elaborate lies and making them seem like truth. But beneath all that, he also saw something else, fear. Genuine, overwhelming fear of being discovered. "Please," Dylan said, finally, her voice small and broken. "Please don't tell anyone. Please don't." "How did you survive?" RJ asked abruptly, cutting off her plea. "We all thought you were dead." "Luna died. The police said you ran into traffic. How are you here? How are you alive?" Dylan wrapped her arms tighter around herself, her knuckles turning white as her grip intensified. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't explain. It's too complicated. It's too dangerous." The wind blew across the patio again, but this time there were no papers to scatter. RJ stood holding Luna's or Dylan's or whoever she truly was design sketches in his trembling hands, feeling like the ground beneath his feet had shifted and he was struggling to find solid ground again. Everything he thought he knew about the mysterious woman who had inserted herself into Will's life, everything he thought he understood about her presence at the beach house, everything suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. The designs in his hands were no longer innocent art lessons. They were evidence of a conspiracy, of an elaborate deception, of someone living a double life right under their noses. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting the patio in shades of orange and gold, RJ Forrester stood face to face with a ghost from his past, a ghost that had somehow learned to walk among the living under a false name, continuing the very work that had once defined her, while hiding secrets that could explode at any moment. The question now wasn't how Luna had survived. The question was, what did she want, and what would she do to protect her newly constructed identity, now that it had been exposed? The answers to those questions would determine the fate of everyone at the beach house.